I was running through the hospital corridor, not thinking about anything except finding her. The nurse had called me 30 minutes earlier. My mother had collapsed at the market. Her blood pressure had dropped, and she was now in emergency care. I had never heard her sound so weak. I rushed to the hospital with fear growing inside me, like something cold spreading through my chest. When I finally found her room, I stopped at the door. She was lying in the bed, pale and still. Machines beeped softly beside her. She looked smaller than I remembered, as if all the years had caught up to her in a single afternoon. I stepped inside and sat beside her, holding her hand. It felt cold, too cold. I whispered that I was there, that everything was going to be fine, but I knew I was saying that more for myself than for her. She opened her eyes slowly. For a moment, she stared at me like she did not recognize me. Then her lips moved. I leaned closer to hear her. She said one word, a name I had never heard before, and then she closed her eyes again. That was the moment everything began to fall apart. I tried to stay calm. I told myself it was the medicine, the stress, the confusion. But the name kept echoing in my mind. I said it over and over on the way home. It felt like a key, and I was afraid of what it might unlock. The next day, after speaking with the doctor, I returned to my mother's house. It was quiet and clean, the same as always. Nothing looked out of place, but now, every object, every picture on the wall felt like it could be hiding something. I went to her room and sat on the bed. I opened the drawer in her nightstand and found an old notebook. It was one I remembered from years ago. She used to write her shopping lists in it, but the back pages were different. They were filled with notes written in a different style. The handwriting was uneven. It looked like she had written them in the dark or with shaking hands. I read through them, line by line, and then I stopped. My name was there, alongside a second name, the same one she had spoken in the hospital. I froze. I turned the page and found a letter folded inside. It was dated 20 years ago, my birth year. I opened it carefully. The paper was thin and yellow. The ink had faded, but I could still read every word. It was not written by my mother. It was from someone else. Someone who had loved me. Someone who had lost me. I read the letter 3 times before I could believe it. Then I sat in the dark for a long time, holding it in my lap. My heart was loud in my chest. I felt like I was falling. The woman who raised me had lied to me my entire life, and the person I thought I was did not exist. When I finally stood up, I looked around her room. I saw the photos again. Her smile, my childhood, birthdays, school days, all of them had a new meaning now. I was not her daughter, at least not by blood. She had taken me in, but she had never told me the truth. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to cry, but I felt empty, like a puzzle with too many missing pieces. I needed answers, and I knew I would not find them in that house. That night, I visited the hospital again. My mother was awake, but tired. Her eyes were dull. I sat beside her and waited. I wanted to ask questions, but I could not. Not yet. I looked at her and saw both the woman who raised me and the stranger who kept the truth from me. Before we continue, I would love to know, where are you listening from? Which city? Which country? Share it in the comments. And if you are finding this story moving and want to hear more emotional English stories, do consider subscribing. It helps you stay connected to every new chapter we share. Back at home, I could not sleep. I lay in bed with the letter under my pillow. I felt like I was living someone else's life. My past had been rewritten without my permission. I thought about every moment from my childhood, the times she held me, the stories she told, the way she looked at me when she thought I was not watching. Were those moments real, or part of something else? The next morning, I called the number written at the bottom of the letter. My hands shook as I held the phone. It rang twice, then a woman answered. Her voice was soft. She said hello, and I froze. I had nothing planned to say, so I said my name. There was a long silence. Then the woman whispered, "I've been waiting for this call." At that moment, I knew everything was going to change. I asked her who she was. My voice sounded strange to me, like it belonged to someone else. She paused, then said her name, the same name written at the top of the letter. My heart felt like it stopped for a second. She said she had written that letter after I was born. She said she had never stopped thinking about me. I sat there, unable to speak. It was like I had opened a door that had been locked my whole life, and now the wind was rushing in from every direction. She told me she had been young, scared, and alone, that she had been forced to give me away, not because she wanted to, but because someone else had decided it was better that way. She said my mother, the woman who raised me, had promised to tell me the truth one day, but that day never came. I listened quietly, holding the phone so tightly my hand began to hurt. I asked her why she waited so long. She said she had written letters every year but never sent them. She was afraid. She did not want to break my life open. Until now. After the call, I sat on the floor with the letter again. I touched the name at the bottom and tried to feel something, but it was too much. Everything felt too big. I was not ready to accept her. Not yet, but I could not forget her voice. The next few days passed slowly. My mother's health improved and she was moved to a quiet recovery room. I visited her every morning. We did not talk much. I watched her sleep. I waited for her to bring up the truth, but she never did. On the fourth day, I brought the letter with me. I sat next to her bed, placed the letter on the table, and asked her to read it. Her hands trembled as she opened it. She looked at it for a long time, then looked at me. Her eyes were full of tears. She admitted everything. She said she had known my birth mother when they were younger. They had been friends. My birth mother had fallen in love with someone who left her when she got pregnant. She had no family support. She was desperate, and my mother, The woman I had called Mom all my life had stepped in. She offered to take me, raise me, give me a home. But she also made a promise to never tell me unless I asked. I asked her why she kept it secret. She said she was afraid of losing me, afraid I would stop loving her, afraid I would run to the woman who gave birth to me and forget the woman who held me through every fever, every nightmare, every first day of school. She looked at me and said I had always been hers, not by blood, but by everything that truly mattered. I did not know what to say. I felt torn between two lives, one built on love and one stolen from the truth. I did not hate her, but I could not forgive her yet either. There was too much to process, too much pain hidden behind her silence. When I returned home that evening, I went to my room and sat by the window. The sun was setting. The sky was pink and soft. I thought about the woman on the phone, the one who said she had waited 20 years to hear my voice. I thought about the woman in the hospital, the one who gave me her whole life, but not her whole truth. And I thought about myself, who I was, who I wanted to be. For the first time, I realized I did not have a clear answer. That night, I could not sleep. I walked around the house, touching things that had once made me feel safe. The kitchen counter where I used to do homework, the hallway wall with my height marks, the photos on the shelf, they were still mine. But now they felt different, like they belonged to a story I only half knew. In the morning, I called the woman again. I asked if we could meet. She said yes. She sounded calm, but I could hear the nerves in her voice. We agreed to meet at a park near her house, somewhere quiet. I drove there slowly. My hands were sweating on the wheel. I kept thinking about what I would say, what I would feel. But when I saw her standing there, all those thoughts disappeared. She looked nervous too. Her eyes were searching my face like she was trying to memorize it. We sat on a bench under a tree. She told me about her life, how she had moved cities, changed jobs, tried to move on, but there was always a part of her that stayed in the past, the part that remembered holding me as a baby, even for a short time. She showed me a small bracelet she had kept, a hospital tag with my birth date. It was worn and soft. I touched it carefully. I did not cry. I just felt quiet inside. I told her about my life, my school, my mother, my fears, my confusion. She listened like it was the most important story she had ever heard. When we stood to leave, she asked if she could hug me. I nodded. Her arms felt gentle, familiar in a strange way, like something lost and found again. That evening, I sat at my desk and wrote in my journal. For the first time, I wrote about who I was, not the daughter of one woman or the other, but a girl who had been loved in two very different ways, one in silence, one in waiting. I was not angry anymore. I was still hurt, but I understood. The truth had been hidden for 20 years, but now it was mine to carry, and I would carry it carefully. The days after meeting her felt like walking through a new world. Everything I saw reminded me of something from before, but each memory now had two shadows instead of one. I tried to go back to my normal routine, but something inside me had changed. I could not stop thinking about the two women who had shaped my life in ways I never understood until now. My birth mother began sending me short messages every morning. They were gentle, careful, never too much. She wanted to give me space. She said she was grateful I wanted to know her at all. I found myself looking forward to those messages. They reminded me that someone out there had never forgotten me, that someone had loved me quietly from a distance for 20 years. Meanwhile, my mother was still recovering. I visited her every afternoon. I brought flowers, books, and quiet conversation. We talked about small things, the weather, food, TV shows. But the silence between us now carried a different weight. It was full of things we had not said, things we both knew were waiting. One day, as I was helping her fold a blanket, she reached for my hand. She held it and looked at me for a long moment. Her voice was softer than usual. She asked me if I still saw her as my mother. I nodded. Then I said the only thing that felt true. I told her I did not know what I felt, but I still needed her. Her eyes filled with tears, and she squeezed my hand tightly. That was enough. At home, I started sorting through old albums. I looked at my childhood pictures in a different way. Each photo was a question. What was she thinking when she took this? Did she feel guilt, fear, or just love? I imagined her carrying both truths every day. The joy of being my mother, and the weight of the lie. That kind of life must have been lonely in its own way. One evening, I found a small box hidden behind the bookshelf. It was filled with letters tied with a ribbon. I opened one. It was from my birth mother, dated every year on my birthday. All of them were unopened. I realized my mother had kept them but never shown them to me. Perhaps she had read them in private, trying to decide if or when I should see them. Perhaps she had never read them at all. I read every letter that night. My birth mother had written about her hopes for me, her dreams, her regrets. She never sounded angry, only full of longing. She wrote about what she thought I might be like. If I liked to read, or dance, or spend time in nature. She had made up stories about the life I might be living. She ended every letter the same way. I hope you are safe. I hope you are loved. Reading those words broke something open inside me. I cried for a long time, not because I was sad, but because for the first time, I truly felt seen by someone I had never met until now. The next day, I visited her again. This time, I brought her a copy of one of my childhood photos. I told her the story behind it. The day we went to the lake, how I fell in the water and my mother laughed instead of scolding me. She smiled and said she had dreamed of stories like that. I told her she could ask me anything. She asked if I had ever felt alone. I said yes, but I was learning not to be. We began to meet more often, slowly, carefully. I did not call her Mom. That word still belonged to the woman who raised me, but I did not call her a stranger either. She was becoming something in between, a new part of my story, one I was still writing. I also spent more time with my mother. She had changed too. She no longer spoke with certainty. She listened more. She asked if I was okay, not expecting a perfect answer. One evening, we cooked dinner together. She looked at me and said she had always believed love could fix anything, but now she knew love also meant telling the truth, even when it hurt. We ate in silence after that, but it was a peaceful silence, a shared silence, the kind that comes after you say what matters most. One Sunday, I brought both women together. We met at a quiet cafe near the river. I did not know what would happen. I did not expect a perfect conversation or easy forgiveness. I just wanted them to meet. They greeted each other politely, then talked like two people holding the same memory from different sides. My mother thanked her for giving me life. My birth mother thanked her for giving me love. I sat between them, feeling like a bridge, a daughter made from two worlds. I realized I did not have to choose one over the other. I could belong to both. My story was not broken. It was just more complicated than I had believed. Later that week, I started writing my own letters, not to send, just for myself. I wrote to the girl I used to be, the one who believed everything was simple. I told her it was okay to feel lost. I told her she would be okay. Then I wrote one to my future daughter, if I ever had one. I promised her I would tell her the truth, no matter what. I would not let fear decide for me. That night, I lit a candle and placed it by the window. My mother used to do that when she was waiting for someone to come home. I realized I had been waiting too. Not for a person, but for the truth. And now that it was here, I felt both heavier and lighter at the same time. The next morning, I stood in front of the mirror and looked at myself carefully. For the first time, I saw more than a reflection. I saw a story, a past, a present, and a future, all held together by the strength of a girl who had lost her name and found it again. Time moved forward, even though part of me stayed behind. I was still learning how to live with two truths. I had two mothers, two beginnings, and for the first time in my life, I was building something that belonged fully to me, not something handed to me or hidden from me. I began to see small changes in myself. I no longer avoided hard questions. When people asked about my family, I answered with honesty. I said I had a mother who raised me and another who gave birth to me. Most people did not know what to say after that. Some looked confused. Others gave a soft smile. But none of that mattered. I was not speaking for them. I was speaking for me. There were still moments of doubt. At night, I sometimes woke up with my heart racing, unsure where I was. My dreams were strange, full of voices and faces from different times in my life. Sometimes I saw the child version of myself, walking through rooms filled with locked doors. In those dreams, I always looked for someone, but I never knew who. Now, I understood that I had been searching for the truth. One afternoon, my birth mother gave me a small gift. It was a necklace with a simple silver pendant. She said it had belonged to her mother, and she wanted me to have it. I held it in my hand, feeling the weight of something passed down through time. I wore it not as a symbol of one family over another, but as a reminder of everything I had survived. My mother, the one who raised me, was growing older. Her steps were slower. Her hands often reached for mine when we walked together. She did not speak much about the past anymore, but I could see in her eyes that she was trying to be present, trying to give me space and comfort at the same time. I appreciated that more than I could say. One evening, she asked me if I ever wanted to know who my father was. I was not expecting the question. She had never brought him up before. I said yes, not because I was ready, but because I had learned that waiting for the right time often meant missing it. She handed me another letter. This one was older, more faded. It was from him, a man I had never met. He had written only once. He had signed it with a first name only. There was no return address. But he had written that he wished he could have been part of my life. He had left when he found out my birth mother was pregnant. But later, he regretted it. He had tried to find her, tried to find me, but it had been too late. I read that letter over and over. It was hard to believe the words came from someone who had walked away. But people are not always simple. They can leave and still love. They can hurt and still regret. I was beginning to understand that life was not black and white. It was 1,000 shades of gray. Weeks turned into months. I met more of my birth mother's side of the family. Aunts, cousins, a grandmother who held my face in her hands and cried when she saw me. She said I looked like her sister. She said I was a missing piece finally returned. I did not know how to respond, so I simply stayed close and listened. At the same time, I helped my mother organize the house. We cleaned closets, sorted boxes, donated clothes. It was her way of making peace. She said it felt good to let go. I think she meant more than just the objects. One morning, we sat outside with cups of tea. She looked at me and said she had one more thing to give me. She went inside and returned with a small envelope. Inside was a key. She told me it opened a small cabin near the coast, a place she had bought years ago. She said she had wanted to give it to me one day but never found the right moment. She said now was the moment. I visited the cabin the following weekend. It was small, quiet, surrounded by trees and the sound of the sea. I stood at the doorway for a long time before unlocking it. The air smelled of salt and wood. The space inside was simple. A table, a bed, a bookshelf, and a window with a wide view of the ocean. I spent the whole day there, reading, writing, thinking. It felt like a safe place to put my thoughts in order, a place that belonged to no one else but me. On my way home, I realized I had not cried in days. Not because the pain was gone, but because I had made space for it. I had stopped fighting it, and in doing so, I had found room for joy again. That night, I cooked dinner with both of my mothers. We sat at the table like three people trying to find a new rhythm. We talked about food, music, movies, normal things. But underneath it all was something beautiful. Forgiveness. Not because we had forgotten the past, but because we had accepted it. I looked at them and felt a deep sense of gratitude. They had both loved me in different ways, both failed me in some ways, but both were still here, and so was I. Before bed, I stood in front of the mirror again. This time I smiled, not because everything was perfect, but because I was no longer lost. I was no longer afraid of who I was. My name was still mine. My story